Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. So, after a few of the questions that came through on the live show and thinking about whatever current top of mind stuff is in my head, I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about altered states. And obviously, um, the altered types of states I'm going to talk about are not the ones that are induced by using drugs of various kinds, because that's not how I roll. It's not what I do. It doesn't work for my body. Um, and just briefly touching on that topic, the reason why I don't find it useful, besides my own peculiar brain chemistry and my level of sensitivity to substances in general, is because I feel I have a lack of control over the experience. And one of the things that I like to have, or need to have, or want to have, whatever word works, when it comes to doing magic and so forth, is the ability to shift my state of consciousness at will, which is actually one of the definitions of magic that Starhawk uses in her book, the ability to change your state of consciousness at will. And since that was one of my earlier influences as far as written material is concerned, it clearly had an impact on my thinking. Um, Not that, the way I do it is going to be the right way for everyone, but if we're going to talk about altered states, that's an important distinction, is how much control do you have or do you want to have over your state of awareness? If you are an extreme sensitive, like I am, um, and then you take something that makes you more sensitive to people, but it has a time delay ingredient in it, um, then that means that you're along for the ride, whether you want to be or not. And as an empath and a clairvoyant, um, and often a telepath, I like to be able to control those states of awareness within myself. So, first off, for me, um, there's a lot of substances in the world that give me effects I don't like. So, the important first step to take is to figure out what affects your brain chemistry and your mental state, what those changes are, whether they're good changes or not good changes, and to be consciously aware of what you put into your body that can affect how you function. So, the things that I have discovered that have an effect on my brain chemistry are some of fairly common things that are out there, like melatonin. You can, they're doing melatonin everything right now. It's like you get something to boost your immune system and to help you sleep at night, like a nighttime medication for colds or whatever. And they add melatonin to it. So I'm a label reader when it comes to that kind of stuff, because one of the known side effects for melatonin is horrific nightmares, which is the one I get. I had no idea that that was an effect on me until I tried it once. It was like beginning of the craze, and I thought, I like to sleep. If this helps me sleep better, why not? And I found out why not immediately. And the nightmares are, we're talking horrific, bloody, dismemberment, violence, just screaming nightmares. And I think it took me 2 or 3 days to figure out it was melatonin, did a little research, and went, oh, okay, that's not for my brain. It doesn't like it. I already make enough serotonin. I may be sort of heavy on the serotonin. Maybe that has something to do with psychic abilities. I don't know. It's possible. Um, and so maybe this will apply to more than just me. Maybe this is something that affects people who are like me in general more than I know. And then another substance I discovered that has a similar side effect is kava kava. Um, and it has the same side effect, horrific nightmares. But interestingly enough, when I have those, I'm very disconnected from the dream itself, unlike with the melatonin, which will have me screaming in my sleep. With the kava kava, it's kind of like I'm watching this horrific scene happen, but I have no emotional connection to it, which makes a certain amount of sense because it is a known substance that is a natural anesthetic. It numbs. You can, if you drink kava kava tea, it numbs your throat. So it's a local anesthetic, and then I wake up and remember the dream, and then I'm horrified. So yeah, that was definitely off the table. My husband Ian, he can take both of those without any kind of effects whatsoever, at least at this point. So it's me. Um, Another common substance that's out there is NutraSweet or aspartame. And once again, I get to have the delightful side effect from that of what they call a doomsday attack. Now, I did not know that that was a potential side effect. I just knew it was a bad idea for me, one of those instinctive things where, when it came out on the market, thinking about it logically, here is a molecule that takes several pages to write. H2O doesn't take very much to write. Sugar doesn't take that much to write. A natural sugar molecule is a relatively short description. Um, and it seemed like a bad idea to put that complex, large molecule in my body, not knowing what my body would do with the components and how it would break it down. And certainly, there are a lot of evidence at this point that some of the substances that this molecule can make in your body include things like formaldehyde in your brain. Seems like a bad thing to have in your brain. And I had never had it before. I had stayed away from it until I made the mistake of trusting my chiropractor's sense of health, because him and his wife were really into health stuff. And I purchased a vitamin supplement from them. It was called Get Going. It was a B supplement. I have trouble absorbing B vitamins, and this is something you mix in as a liquid. And I just thought, hey, this would be great. I have trouble absorbing these vitamins. Maybe this will be a more absorbable form, going straight through the mucous membranes, etc., instead of through digestive processes. So I bought some and brought it home. And you're supposed to take it first thing in the morning, to get going. And so I took it the first morning, and this is when we still had our business, and I met with Ian every day for lunch at the same time. We pretty much went to lunch every day to a restaurant at that point because I was in my practice and he had the business he was running and so forth. And so we'd be sitting in the restaurant, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, I had the biggest premonition, intense experience I've ever had in my entire life, where I knew without a doubt that all life on Earth, including microbial life, was about to die in the next 5 minutes. I mean, it's hard to describe, but doomsday definitely fits the descriptor. And I was shocked. I'm like, wow, whoa, what kind of a premonition is this? This is intense. Nothing seemed to be happening. So I thought, okay, maybe it was just some strange thing that hit me out of the blue, and it was nothing to do with that. Next morning, I took it again. Next day at lunch, exactly the same time, it hit me again. And I'm like, well, okay, this is 2 days in a row. This is getting to be weird. It's like, and the timing is kind of off, but I'm still not putting it together. So third morning, I took it again. And I think the third time it hit me so hard, I actually fell face first into the table we were sitting at the restaurant. It literally knocked me flat, which I don't think I've ever had happen before, and I haven't had it happen since, thank goodness. And at this point, it's like I've been watching TV and watching the news, and if ever there was a 3-day period when nothing major was happening, we're talking no major wars, no volcanic eruptions, no giant twisters, no hurricanes, no major disasters, no terrorist attacks, nothing. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, am I doing something different? Like, am I eating something different? Am I taking something different? And I go like, oh yeah, I'm taking that vitamin supplement every morning. So, got home, started reading the ingredients, aspartame. Husband says, oh, that's a NutraSweet. I'm like, what? I knew I should never take that. And then I started looking up potential things, and doomsday attack was one of the things they mentioned. And I'm like, aptly named. So, not an altered state I cared to have. Um, and there, it's like paying attention to what you put in your body and how it affects your thinking is important, because everything you do can alter your state and bring you into a different state of awareness. I stopped taking it. The doomsday attacks stopped. Turned out it was a good thing I experienced that directly, because my granddaughter was consuming fairly large quantities of diet sodas and various types of diet drinks that were filled with aspartame. And she was having doomsday attacks. This was before she came to live with us. She was up in Portland at the time. And she's calling me on the phone. She thinks the world's going to end. She's stuck inside the store. She's afraid to leave. I'm talking to her, and I suddenly ask her if she's drinking any diet stuff. And she says, well, yeah. And I tell her about my experience. And her brain chemistry is similar to mine in what affects it. So I finally convinced her to stop taking that stuff, and the doomsday attacks stopped. She thought she was going insane. Yeah. So, when we talk about the idea of getting into altered states, food and vitamins and substances that we take, aside from the well-known ones, can seriously affect our state and how we function. Another one I can't do is MSG. It took me a while to figure that one out. I always felt really strange after I had it, and like ungrounded, and I would be like disconnected from my body. It's like I was perpetually astral traveling, but not wanting to, and there was no way for me to get back in my body. It was just for about 8 hours. It affects me for about that period of time. And so, I stopped using it. We had a new Chinese restaurant in town, and at this point, I guess I thought that all Chinese restaurants in the United States didn't use MSG because it's fine for, someone of Oriental Asian descent. They don't seem to have a problem with it, but a lot of people, not just me, have a problem with it. And so, I didn't think about it. And then we ate there, and I would feel weird for a number of hours, like I couldn't connect with my own head. I thought at first maybe it was something they did with the meat, so then I went strictly vegetarian. Same thing happened. And then finally, one day we were in there, I said, so, do you use MSG? And she says, oh, yes, in absolutely everything, unless you ask us not to. And I'm like, okay, so I can't have their soup because it comes preloaded with MSG. And I have to be very conscious and aware when I go into a restaurant, if I'm going to eat out, to make sure that I don't consume something that is going to mess with my state of consciousness. So, those are the ones that are obvious to me that I know about. And I'm sure if you know, sort of do a mental checklist. In fact, I recommend, if you're not sure what might be affecting you, to do a food diary and a symptom diary or an impression diary about what you're eating and how you feel, because it can be hours after you consume something before you get an effect, or it can be instantaneous. And if your path is to learn how to walk between the worlds and to use magic and to be effective at that, you need to know your own tolerances, and you need to understand your own body and your own brain and its chemistry and what substances affect it. And, of course, there's food allergies, which are a different subject altogether, some of which can kill you. So hopefully you know what those are if you have them. Usually the first time something like that happens, it becomes painfully clear. I had an antibiotic change my state of consciousness once, which was a very strange experience. I'm allergic to penicillin and have been since I was small. When I was a kid, they gave you that for absolutely everything. And if you have too much of something, you have a much higher likelihood of becoming allergic to it. And I did. Of course, doctors always want to know exactly how I know I'm allergic to it, but I'm allergic to it. And I went to the emergency room for an infection, and they gave me what turned out to be a penicillin derivative. So in the same general family, and I didn't recognize it. And of course, I figure they have my medical records at the hospital, and on it should say I'm allergic to penicillin, because I tell every single doctor I've ever seen in my entire life, when they ask me, do you have any allergies, that's number one off my mouth. Apparently, we cannot trust them to pay attention to this. So she put me on this antibiotic, and it took a couple of days for it to build up enough in my system. And the experience was quite disorienting and odd. Like, I was a typist at the time, I was working in a legal office. So typing, depositions, divorce papers, property stuff, whatever the attorneys needed, I was kind of in the secretarial pool, I guess. So whatever they wanted to have typed, I was one of the ones who did it. And I was typing along, and then all of a sudden, in an instant, I went from knowing how to type and what I was typing to suddenly not knowing how to do it, but remembering that I did know how to do it a few seconds ago. So I was very aware of the fact that I suddenly had a complete change in my ability to think. And I'm not sure how I managed to express this distress to my supervisor, but she decided I needed to go to the doctor, and I left by myself, which was probably ill-advised, and walked to the doctor's office and walked in, and they wanted to see my medical card. Now, I knew I had one, but I didn't know what it looked like. So I handed the woman my purse, and I says, I know I have one in here, but I'm not sure what it looks like. And this was my first clue as to what this did to me. It separated the hemispheres of my brain. The half of the brain that identifies the object with the other half of the brain that identifies the name of the object. So, like, I could see an apple and I would know what it was, but if someone said, give me an apple, I wouldn't be able to identify the apple with the word. And so that was weird, really weird. And then I got the swollen tongue briefly, apparently just to let me know that it was a bad idea. And they basically decided, since I wasn't having an anaphylactic reaction right then, it just happened a little bit, and I'd never experienced the tongue swelling before, just for a few seconds. It was very odd. They sent me home to sleep it off. So basically for 3 days I couldn't function. So I had something similar happen again and never could identify the source. My suspicion was that there was an antibiotic in some chicken that I'd eaten, because I had that same kind of mental reaction, and I went from swallowing normally 1 second to feeling like a sea urchin was trying to climb down my throat. And again, something to be aware of if you have to go to an emergency room. I could not. I filled out the form they had, the way they had it set up at the time, and I put down my symptoms. I could write my symptoms down, but at the end of the form it says put completed form in gold slot. And I looked and I did not know what a gold slot was. There was a gold slot there, but it wasn't labeled gold slot, so I had no clue that that's what they were talking about. My daughter came up and saw the paper was done, and she picked up the paper and put it in the gold slot. I was like, oh, look, that must be a gold slot. It's not my normal form of awareness. And then the nurse, nobody told her that I'd had a change in my state of consciousness, altered state that I was in, just thought I was an idiot. She was trying to put the thing on my finger to measure my heart rate and my oxygen level, and I did not know what she was doing. I thought she was trying to hand me something, so I kept trying to take it, and she kept taking it away and like making frustrated noises and whatnot. My daughter again says, just show her a finger, it doesn't matter which one. So I showed her a finger and they put it on there, and it's like, oh, that's what they're doing. And I never felt them do the blood pressure cuff, so my awareness of half of my body was also kind of missing. I was definitely having an allergic reaction to whatever it was that I'd eaten. I ended up with a full body itch attack, which was very strange. By the time they got me in there, it was past. So once again, yay, lucky me. So, yeah. If you've ever had anything like that happen, or even if you haven't, talk to your family or anyone who might be going to the emergency room with you, to let them know that if you have a sudden change in awareness, consciousness, if you're in a sudden altered state, that's not your typical ability to communicate and talk and so forth, that they should let medical people know, because it is a symptom of something. But if they just assume that you're a moron and you don't know what you're doing and this is how you usually are, they're not going to treat it as a symptom. So those are, some of the experiences of being in an altered state that happened because of something I ingested accidentally, not on purpose. I've had my on purpose ones as well, and I survived them, thank goodness. But still. So, to wanting to be in an altered state and ways to get there where you are in control. Obviously, meditation is one of the ways that people use a lot to get into an altered state of consciousness, because it's a method of going within yourself to quiet your mind, to allow yourself to feel or see impressions. For people who have a hard time entering an altered state that way, they have to try other tactics, like movement or drawing or art or creativity in some manner can help somebody get into an altered state. Doing a ritual, and certainly, I have the videos on how to cast a circle, why you're casting a circle, what it means, and when you're drawing and the circle, you're creating an environment within which you are safe to be in an altered state so that you can experience it. And when you're finished, you can undo it and go back to ordinary, which is hardly ordinary, reality, other types of reality, more familiar forms of reality. Because really, we're in altered states all the time, we just don't necessarily call them that. And and the more often you do those kinds of ritual forms, the stronger you create that environment within which it's safe for you to experience something unusual. A lot of people have questions about, like, I was doing something and then I felt really spaced out and kind of dizzy and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens when you go into an altered state a lot. And that's not necessarily a bad thing unless you have a health condition that is signaling that you need to see a doctor for. And that's one of the reasons for the practice, for being with other people. If you're concerned about the state you might be in, that someone can monitor you, take care of you if something goes awry, if your blood pressure drops too much, and you suddenly, like, become unaware of your environment. So definitely making sure that if you're exploring being in altered states on purpose, that you have something set up, or you're familiar enough with that state that you know how to go in and how to go out of it. Just the point of, like, the sacred tree meditation is a way of pulling yourself into an altered state, connecting yourself to energy forces outside of yourself, the earth and the universal light force and so forth, and attuning your energy centers to allow you to get information in other ways than through the usual normal means. And by usual normal means, I mean the five senses. If you have all five of them, if not whatever senses you have, those are considered the usual means. So what something tastes like, what it smells like, what it feels like, what it looks like, you know, I know there's five. What it sounds like, that's the other one. I don't even know what my five senses are, so there. um, and it's through those interpretations of that we sort of fill the world with the things that we expect to see. And when you're entering a magical altered state, you still have those senses, whatever they are, but they can somehow sometimes change. They can get more, like, sight can get more bright. You can see things moving, shadows, sparks, black spots. When you're trying to develop your ability to, your clairvoyant ability, or your second sight, your third eye, whatever you want to call it, being able to have visions of something that isn't physically there but yet is there because the energy exists. We have energy around us all the time that we don't see or hear or feel, or because our senses are by the way our bodies are and how we interact with them are limiting. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if we had to see everything that was there all the time on the other side, or see all the thought forms that were floating every time somebody thought of you, all of a sudden there would be this thing in front of your face yelling at you or hugging you or whatever, depending on the thought. If every time an ancestor came by to visit, we saw them and they would be physically there, or a spirit guide or an animal spirit or whatever it was, if those things were constantly in our face and around us, we wouldn't be able to drive, we would have a hard time functioning, it would be difficult to talk to people because, bad enough that you're by yourself with all this stuff happening, put another person actually physically there in the room, then you have all their spirit animals and their spirit history, maybe their past lives you might see, or all of their thought forms, and then the people that were thinking at them, and you can see how confusing and chaotic existence would be for us. Now, Animals who see a lot more than we do aren't worried so much about what they see, although dogs often don't like ghosts. They're very unhappy. Cats see them, don't care, so long as they're not, doing something like picking them up and throwing them, which I had happen at one of the investigations I did. They did not like that at all. Yeah, all of a sudden being tossed across a room by an invisible force, not a happy cat place. But in general, animals of all kinds experience reality in a much more vivid, visceral way than we do. Like, a dog's sense of smell is like millions of times better than ours, and a cat's ability to see in the dark. I mean, it's something to remember that the universe as we experience it is defined by our ability to experience it in a limited fashion. And I'm okay with that. I don't need to see all of the radio waves or the sound waves or, all the UV or infrared rays or, all the different things that are out there all the time. The particles coming from the sun, the muons, whatever. It's okay to have a limited vision. And the point of magic is creating an environment where you can expand that environment, your ability to interact with the environment in a different way. And, it's like the techniques are standard kinds of things for people to use in order to, because like over the thousands of years of development, we have figured out ways we can kind of fine tune and target our senses. People are born with different natural tendencies, for sure, but they can be developed. My opinion, the point of magic is not to be able to have psychic powers. That's not the point. But, the point is to get to know yourself, to create an environment where you can communicate with more of the universe than realize that you're not alone, that you're not the only thing that exists, you're not the only form of consciousness. Get a little bit of that ego out of that whole idea that we are like a higher life form than everything else, which we see in everything we do. But the the point is to develop ourselves, and the side effect of that becomes psychic ability. That sort of is like the sort of like, I guess, the point of exercise is to be stronger body, to be better, healthier, or what have you. But the side effect is having more muscle mass or stronger muscles. It's like that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. It's like we've got the practice, and the practice creates the side effects of being able to hear yourself, your own inner voice better, and communicate better with things that other people may not experience on a regular basis. And it takes practice because most people aren't born like fully, completely formed when it comes to that kind of altered state. And and then, for me the question becomes one of balance, because it's like, I look at the natural world, and one of the things that is constant through nature is that change is always happening. There is a constant flow from one state to another state. There is no static, staying in place, never changing. Everything is constantly in flux. Everything. The smallest particles that we can detect are always moving. The whole universe is moving. The planet is moving. The sun is moving. The solar system is moving. The galaxy is moving. Everything is in motion. There is no such thing as stillness if you look at it from that point of view. So us being still in our thoughts doesn't mean the same, doesn't mean true stillness, because that kind of stillness doesn't exist. There is no way. Even if you're quiet and not moving and not doing anything, you're still breathing, which means that you're interacting with the air. Molecules are coming in and out of your lungs. You're taking stuff out of the air for you to use. You're putting stuff into the air for other things to use and that you don't need. Everything is a process. The changes of the season, night and day. Coughing, apparently. So, I think I'm going to pause for a second here and get a lozenge. Okay, I have a lozenge. We'll see what good this does. So, since everything is always in flux, trying to maintain a certain state, it's a temporary state. Everything we do is going to be a temporary state. So we're going to allow ourselves to experience reality somewhat differently, and then go back to the normal way we experience reality, and that is not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're like sliding backwards or you're failing. A fair number of people talk about getting to a certain point in their magical progress where all of a sudden they feel disconnected. And we've talked about this before, as far as when you're doing your self-development stuff, when you're trying to create balance in yourself. If you are overbalanced in one direction, like if you've got extreme clairvoyant vision, and you start working on other aspects like grounding, or intuition, or whatever, like more watery things, when you're going through that phase, you're going to be feeling like part of what you already know how to do goes away. And then at some point, when you're getting more balanced, you might feel like you've lost it completely, because you're not having the extremes. You have more control. It's not being thrust upon you. You're not like just walking in a store and suddenly getting visions in your head about what happened in the store. Not that that can't still happen, but you have more choice over when it's going to happen. And that being able to get control over your abilities is important in order for you to control your own energy, because that's your responsibility. It's not someone else's responsibility to adapt to you. It's your responsibility to make sure that your environment is safe for you and that you are taking responsibility for stuff that belongs to you and doesn't belong to them. And learning how not to project on other people is part of this learning process. So, I think in our last show, or maybe the one before that, somebody was asking me about what happens when I sleep with my objects, which is what actually brought this subject up in my mind, because they thought that I was charging the objects while I was asleep, and it's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm tuning my energy field to the energy of that object. And so, like when I make a magical item, be it if I'm making a poppet, I'm tuning that poppet to the person I'm sending healing to, so that when I hold that poppet or put energy into that poppet, it goes to heal the person it's for. I tune into the various crystals that I have, and each one of them helps me to experience or find a doorway into a different kind of energy that I can then experience more completely and become a part of. So like when I really need the light force energy, I'm going to hold a piece of selenite or sleep with it under my pillow. to brighten my aura and to bring me into its field of experience. When I make a wand, the things that I put on the wand, the way I work with the wand, what I'm doing when I manufacture or make a wand is I am tuning the wood and the crystals, my energy, my thoughts, and my consciousness to a specific kind of energy. So when I work with my Venusian wand, I'm using what I've put into the wand to help me tune my body and my energy field into the Venusian energy field. Each one of my wands, whether it's an elemental wand or a planetary wand, that's what they're for, is to help me to tune into a specific kind of energy for that particular altered state. And there's like thousands of different kinds of altered states that you can be in. And so, I use the crystals a lot because I obviously can't take things into my body. Crystals are safe for me because if it's not going to work on me, the crystal manages to vanish and I can't find it anywhere, or it doesn't feel right, and I can't touch it. So I'm tuned in enough to my energy and what feels right for me to be able to tell right away whether something is safe, effective, desired, productive for me to use. So depending on what I want to explore when I'm asleep, if I'm doing astral travel or dream travel and trying to figure stuff out, I can tune my energy field with the various crystals. I use them when I go out to protect my energy field from other people. They know what, I've programmed them to change my energy field in a specific way. Like, I wear this a lot. And, this, I often sleep in this. A lot of times the only time I take this off is when I'm taking a bath or a shower. And so, if I don't have it on and then I put it on, the act of putting it on changes my energy because I've used it for the same reason for so long. And that's how we create magical objects. And I think in other cultures that is, that is the whole point of a temple, a medicine wheel, a sacred space in nature, a sacred grove, whatever it is. It's like, that's the reason why if you go to a place on the planet where people have tuned that spot to shift their awareness and you are fairly open, sometimes maybe even not super open, you're going to sense that energy changing your energy. And so you're being tuned. And, like sound changes our energy, music. I mean, there's like so many different ways to alter how we're feeling. And, taking control of how you feel and altering your state to suit your circumstances is what magic is about. So if your house feels dull, closed in, heavy, fill it with things that make you feel happy and light and energetic. So, it could be a smell that you have strong associations of positivity for. Like in the winter time, a lot of people will put simmer pots on apples, cinnamon, oranges, whatever scent it happens to be for you, roses, all those things, they affect our energy field and they affect our brain and our mind and our spirit. And we can use them to alter the state that we find ourselves in to being in a different state. It doesn't always have to be like communing with the gods. It can just be suddenly discovering that you love to dance by yourself, and there's one particular piece of music that you seem to like more than others, and you're going to sit and listen to that piece of music, or you're going to move your body in a certain way. You're going to express yourself as being a part of the universe, as connected to everything. And we all have physical things in our body that we have to figure out how to deal with. Uh, no one, no, as far as I know, no one's body is perfect. There's always going to be times in our lives where things hurt, or are sluggish, or we're sick, we have a fever, um, we have an undiagnosed illness. I mean, you know, our our body is the thing that's kind of here in this reality, and if we want to get into good altered states, we need to know how to take care of the body that we have as well as we can. So then that allows us the opportunity to go beyond the body from time to time and explore other things. So, like, for me, I have some kind of undiagnosed um, muscular spasm disorder that, when it first started, was extremely terrifying. In fact, the first night it became clear something was wrong, all the small muscles in my body went into spasm. We're talking the muscles like at where my bones connect to each other. Deep muscles. Felt like somebody was trying to choke me because the muscles in my throat around my hyoid went into spasm. I had the muscles inside my ear canal go into spasm, which is very weird. I had the muscles between my ribs go into spasm. And of course, my legs, my feet, just everywhere. And if I was inclined to thinking in those particular lines, I would think I was being assaulted by some demonic spirit being that was just trying to kill me on the spot and was invisible and I couldn't see them. But I didn't think that. Something was wrong. Doctors have no clue. They've never been able to figure that out. Fortunately, I found something that works for me, and that's valerian root. In the list at the beginning, I talked about the kava kava and the melatonin giving horrific nightmares. Valerian root is another plant that can do that. I'm so happy it doesn't do that for me. I found something that works. And so, I have modified my life. I have supplements that I take on a regular basis in order to minimize that. I have braces for my feet because I had my joints try to, actually not try, but go out of joint while I was asleep. My toe went sideways, not down or up, but sideways. Not a good thing. But, that's not something I can address. Not that I've been able to figure out. The point being, everybody's going to have something different that they have to figure out how to deal with and how to cope with. And so you have to figure out how to cope with whatever it is that you have and find survival tactics, whether it's support groups or supplements or medication from the doctor or whatever. It's the genes I got dealt. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the body I'm in. It is lasting so far fairly well, regardless of the issue I have that I've pretty much got under control. Modified everything I do. But, getting into an altered state doesn't make that stuff vanish. So apparently allergies is something else I'm dealing with right now. So I think this is enough to get us started on a conversation as I go and hack my way into the house. So, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.